Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. Naruto stared up at where the man, known as the demon of the hidden mist once was but now was replaced by dense fog. He mentally smiled as he remembered his first encounter with Haku. He was important to the young blonde. After all, he taught young Naruto what made a person truly strong. To protect those precious to you, that is what makes you truly strong. Those were the words that were spoken all those years ago. Returning his attention to reality, the young Jinchuriki could physically feel the intent rolling of Zabuza, and Naruto had to admit that for an unexperienced genin it was suffocating. The clash of two jonin intent to attack. Glancing over, he saw Sakura trembling in fear as she stood in front of Tazuna. Sasuke stared wide-eyed at the man that seemed to personify fear. It was obvious that he had not felt something so intense in his lifetime. He arched an eyebrow when he saw the Uchiha raise his kunai as if believing that injuring himself would free him from the constant reality that was being a shinobi. Anime and manga. Sensing his student's fear, Kakashi spoke. Sasuke, getting the attention of the Uchiha heir, calm down. I will protect you with my life, I'll protect all of you. I will not allow my comrades to die. This seemed to have the desired effect as Naruto could see the trembling in the young Uchiha's body vanish. I wouldn't be so sure, came the raspy voice of Zabuza, who had reappeared in between the three genins and their client. It's over. Don't move, Kakashi said as he turned towards the mist demon and charged him with a kunai in hand, stabbing the man while the three genins and client made some distance between the jonin and missing nin. Now it's over, Sasuke thought with a smirk as he noticed the blood flooding out of Zabuza's stomach, only to notice that it was not blood but water. The impaled man turned to water before falling to the ground with a splash. The eyes of the genin grew wide as they noticed another Zabuza appear in the mist directly behind their sensei. Sensei, behind you, Sakura exclaimed, but she was too late as she watched the bandaged man cleave Kakashi in two. Her eyes grew as wide as saucers as she shrieked in fear of what the swordsman could and most likely would do to them. Kakashi's body fell to the ground with a splash of water. Zabuza eyed the water clone in amazement as he felt Kakashi reappear behind him and raise a kunai to his throat. Now it's over, Kakashi said. You're finished. Zabuza began to chuckle at this, which gained the confusion of the group. Naruto rolled his eyes at the smugness shown by both ninjas. If this had been the war, they would have been 10 times over by this point. Finished? Zabuza questioned once his chuckling died down. You don't get it, do you? Your technique is nothing more than an imitation. I'll never be defeated by a mere copycat ninja like you. Zabuza seemed to sneer the words, copycat ninja. Kakashi growled lowly as the missing nin began to chuckle softly again. You copied my water clone jutsu and thought it would surprise me. You're nothing but a cheap imitation. The demon said before another Zabuza appeared behind Kakashi as the original fell apart into water. Nice try, but I am not that easy to fool. The man swung his behemoth of a sword to slice the silver-haired jonin in two, but Kakashi ducked at the last second, but this did not deter his opponent as he impaled the ground with the large blade before he swiveled on the hilt of his blade and kicked Kakashi through the air and into the waters of the ocean. Sakura stared wide-eyed at where her sensei had fallen. She watched as the man they had entrusted their lives to sink beneath the waters. I can't believe it. Kakashi-sensei is losing. She glanced over to her two teammates with worry evident in her eyes. She knew they were both strong, perhaps stronger than anyone else from their graduating class, but she doubted they could handle this man without getting. Kakashi emerged from the waters of the ocean, but something felt off about the water he was currently wading in. It felt different. Less fluid and more denser. That's when his eyes widened as he noticed it. Too late, Zabuza said as he appeared behind the waterlogged Kakashi. Water prison jutsu, he exclaimed as a dome of water surrounded the jonin. Zabuza chuckled. This prison is made of water, but it's as strong as steel. It's hard to fight when you can't move, you should give up and hand over the bridge builder. The man turned towards the genin as he made one hand sign and a water clone rose from the ground. Sakura's eyes widened in fear as she watched the clone walking out of the water and face them. You think wearing a headband makes you a ninja when you have hovered between life and death so many times that it doesn't faze you, then you may call yourself a ninja, the clone spoke in the same raspy voice of its summoner. When you become so deadly that your name is entered into my bingo book, then you may be called a ninja. But calling upstarts like you ninja is an insult to the craft, the clone said as it made a hand sign and the mist started to grow thick and visibility depleted. The clone disappeared from view and before anyone could react he kicked Naruto in the ribs, causing the young ninja to be sent backward. His headband flew off his forehead and the clone stepped on it. You're nothing but brats. Naruto-kun, Sakura exclaimed with worry for her friend. Kakashi stared at his students before glancing back towards the real Zabuza and turning back to the kids again. Listen, get out of hearing, take the bridge builder and run. Hearing this caught all of their attention. This guy is too much for you, take the bridge builder and run. Run, Sasuke thought with mirth. Listen up and listen well, Naruto said as he glared daggers and pointed an accusatory finger in the original's direction. Put this in your bingo book, ya no eyebrow having freak, the ninja who will become Hokage of Konoha. His name is Naruto Uzumaki. This made Sakura smile as she saw his boundless confidence. Zabuza started to laugh. I really like you, kid, you got guts. Perhaps you can call yourself a ninja. Naruto smirked before Zabuza's eyes took on a more aggressive expression. Sadly, this is where it ends, Zabuza said as he charged with his elbow extended and struck Sasuke in the ribs, sending the unprepared Uchiha to the sailing into a tree with a thud before elbow dropping into his stomach. Naruto sneered and made the familiar hand sign before 15 Narutos surrounded the clone of Zabuza. The demon arched an eyebrow. Shadow clones. He missing nin said as he looked over the crowd. You are impressive. This made Sasuke sneer as he saw the Dobi have a power he believed should be his, but that could be remedied another time, for no, he needed to focus on a way to defeat this missing nin. The Narutos rushed in with kunai in hand, they piled atop the man before each of them were cut in two. The original Naruto sneered at the missing nin as he dug into his pack and unfurled the windmill shuriken. Demon Wind Shuriken. Windmill of Shadows, Naruto exclaimed as he threw the deadly pinwheel towards the clone. Zabuza smirked underneath his bandages before gasping as he noticed the shuriken fly right by him and head straight for his original body. So you missed the clone and aimed for my real body. Smart, the original said before catching the shuriken, but not smart enough, he said as if gloating about how he caught a projectile thrown by a genin. Naruto smirked as Zabuza's eyes widened at the sight of a second windmill shuriken. A second shuriken in the shadow of the first, Zabuza thought, the shadow shuriken jutsu. They all waited on bated breath as the second shuriken flew towards its intended target, but just as it was about to make contact, Zabuza jumped, much to the chagrin of Sakura and Sasuke. I told you a shuriken can't touch me. The demon exclaimed. The blonde smirked and made a show of snapping his thumb and index finger together. Zabuza turned to see the blonde's second shuriken poof into smoke, and out came a second Naruto brandishing a kunai before throwing it. The missing nin's eyes grew wide as he judged the angle of the throw and cursed under his breath as he came to terms with the fact that he couldn't just dodge this one. He removed his arm from the water prison and jumped away to create distance between himself and the newly freed Kakashi. The missing nin turned towards Naruto, enraged that the blonde brat had succeeded in freeing his sensei from the man's dastardly clutches. He spun the shuriken aggressively before unleashing it onto his prey, but as he was about to unleash it, his hand was stopped by the back plating of Kakashi's gloved hand. Your technique worked on me once, but it will not work a second time. Tenten sighed as she stood with her team in the mission hall as their sensei picked out yet another C-rank mission for them. It's not that she didn't want to go on a mission outside of the village. What with Naruto gone off to the land of waves, it was the only thing she could do. Ojiro had gone on a trip to Iron Country to collect some materials to create more of the weapons he sold at the weapon shop and wouldn't be home for a week or two. So there they are standing around waiting for Guy to pick out a mission for them. She sighed as she thought to her blonde husband as she wondered what he could be doing right now, most likely disposing of the demon brothers, quite efficiently she might add. They probably already found out that the mission was in fact, not a C rank but actually a high B to low A rank. All right, my youthful students, the overly energetic voice of their sensei brought her out of her thoughts. The boisterous Jonin stood proud at 6 feet tall with a bowl cut of straight black hair and the whitest smile that had ever existed on the planet. Her teammate Lee was no different. In fact, he looked like an exact copy of their sensei, what with his green spandex suit, orange leg and arm warmers, and those ridiculously large eyebrows that have been mistaken for huge caterpillars at one point. I've secured us a rather youthful mission of delivering a message to Suna. The Hyuga on her team that wore the white, tan, and beige outfit spoke next. How long do we have until we are fated to leave, sensei? Tenten deadpanned at this. She forgot how annoying Neji was when he went on and on about fate when they were young. But thankfully, after he was thoroughly beaten by the dead last, he learned a much-needed lesson: fate does not control us. We'll meet up at the main gate in 10 minutes, get everything you'll need for a week-long journey, Guy said before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Tenten rolled her eyes before walking towards the door. The sooner she got packed, the sooner they could get this mission over with, and the sooner she could get to planning a plan B if this whole save the Uchiha doesn't work out. Not that she really wanted it to work. She hated how that made her sound, but the truth is that she hates the Uchiha. He destroyed her home. He had nearly Naruto on more than one occasion and forced him to make the ultimate sacrifice to protect their home. But her husband was dead set on trying to save him from Orochimaru, and well, she couldn't rightly refuse him something he wanted so badly. All he asked for was a chance after all. Anime and manga. Is everything alright on this most youthful of days, Tenten-san? Asked the sensei clone himself, Rock Lee. She looked at him as she walked. Their houses were in the same direction, so he would be walking with her most of the way, while Neji lived at the Hyuga compound, which was in the opposite direction. I am fine. Lee just got a lot on my mind, she said to avoid the conversation. People take Lee for an idiot, but that wasn't the case. He was damn smart. She knew she couldn't lie to him repeatedly and not expect him to eventually figure something out. It's just my boyfriend. You have a boyfriend? Lee said in excitement. That is most youthful. Who is he? The weapon mistress looked at her ninjutsu-challenged friend and smiled. His name's Naruto Uzumaki. Lee nodded as she spoke about the boy that had won her heart. To the young taijutsu specialist, this Naruto person sounded like a good guy. Selfless and caring, or as Lee would, most youthful. He's gone on a mission right now and probably won't be back until the Chunin exams roll around. Lee nodded. And you miss him? Well, yeah. I wouldn't still be with him if I didn't love him, she said with a smile. I am more worried that he'll come home broken, she said, earning a confused look from her bull-haired friend. You know, first and whatnot. Lee nodded and gave her a reassuring smile. Well, when he does come back, he'll have you right there to cheer him up, he said before turning and disappearing behind a corner as he walked home. Tenten watched as her friend walked away. She didn't like lying to her friends and least of all her teammates, but she couldn't really tell Lee that she was thinking about how to a fellow Leaf Shinobi, assuming that Naruto's plan doesn't work. So she walked away, her destination being not too far away from where she parted ways with Lee. "San, I am home," she called out to her father as she made her way into the weapon shop. Ojiro poked his head around the corner of the wall that separated the sales floor from the staring way. Ten-chan, what are you doing here? Is everything alright? Everything's fine. Naruto-kun's out on a mission and I have to get my things ready for a delivery mission with my team, she said with a smile as she passed him and walked up the stairs to the family room. He watched as the pillar of water began to seep back into the ocean from which it came. Kakashi crouched on a tree branch just above where Zabuza was stuck with kunai. The silver-haired man looked down at the demon with narrowed eyes and in turn, Zabuza glanced up at him with shock in his own. Naruto watched this from his place as he stood beside Sakura guarding Tazuna. How can you see into the future? Zabuza managed to get out, referring to when Kakashi copied his water dragon jutsu even before he himself was able to cast it. Kakashi smirked underneath his mask. Yes, this is your last battle, the silver-haired Jonin said as he pulled out a kunai. Ever. Just then Naruto could slightly pick up on something moving very quickly through the air thanks to the advanced senses he received for being a Jinchuriki. The rapidly moving objects were simple senbon typically used for medical practice. The senbon quickly flew towards their intended target, Zabuza's neck. They struck the exact spot that paralyzes the human body. Naruto smirked internally. The rest of the group present stared dumbly as the demon of the mist's body fell limply to the ground. What the? Questioned Sakura before the hunter Nin decided to make himself known. You were right, it was his last battle, the fake hunter chuckled. Kakashi eyed the hunter before jumping to Zabuza's side and placing 2 fingers on the man's neck to check for a pulse. When he noticed no vital signs, he informed his team of his discovery. The hunter bowed slightly. Thank you, I've been tracking him for quite some time. By the mask, I can tell you're a hunter from Kiri, Kakashi stated as the hunter jumped to his side. The Jonin decided to make his way towards his genin as to not interfere with the hunter's work. That is correct. Naruto smirked before giving his masked friend a thumbs up. Good work, Hunter-san. The hunter bowed towards the blonde before picking up the seemingly dead man. The blonde watched with mild concern. Sure, he could expose Haku, but that would possibly mean having to fight him, and Naruto didn't really want to do that. And if they had won said battle, then that would only mean Gato would hire another missing nin, possibly one that even he with his future knowledge didn't know of. He decided to let them go. Besides, this only means when he meets him again in the forest on their 3rd night in Wave that Naruto could possibly speak with the missing nin duo and persuade them to ditch the contract they have with Gato in favor of working with him to stop Sasuke. I thank you for what you have done, Haku said as he shunshined away. Kakashi I smile at his students as he began to walk towards them. The blonde began to move closer to his sensei, knowing that any second now that we will collapse from chakra exhaustion. Soon enough Kakashi started to fumble in his steps, and when he began to go down, Naruto was there to catch him. Anime and manga, sensei. The blonde shook his head. He's fine, just exhausted, he said before turning towards their client. Tazuna-san, how far are we from your house? Tazuna noted. Not far now. Once they made it to the house they met Tsunami, Tazuna's daughter and owner of the house. She was a beautiful woman in her mid to late 20s, she had dark blue hair and soft eyes. He lay Kakashi on a spar futon in one of the guest rooms. By that point he had woken up but was too weak to move around. Naruto leaned against the wall of Tsunami's house as he listened to Kakashi explain to his less than knowledgeable teammates how they didn't know that a hunter ninja was supposed to dispose of the body on the scene. Was shocking, really. It was at this moment that in the future he would change the academy's curriculum so that future generations would have this knowledge. Sakura looks absolutely terrified, and the blonde couldn't blame her. Zabuza was her first real opponent and he was at the top of a very long list of people you don't want to mess with. Sasuke looked thrilled at the prospect of getting a shot at fighting with Zabuza and this mystery person. Naruto had to hold back a scoff. Leave it to the Uchiha's arrogance to make him believe he was something special. He didn't even have his Sharingan activated and yet he believed he was so much more than anyone else, like he was some sort of superhuman. So yeah, Zabuza's still alive, the silver-haired Jonin said as he took a moment to glance at his genin. So starting tomorrow, I am going to begin your training. Naruto internally scoffed. No real training was going to be done. Hell, the blonde was more a sensei to Sakura than Kakashi was. Besides, all they would be learning was the tree walking exercise that Naruto already knew. He hadn't started Sakura on it just yet because she had yet to learn anything that she couldn't handle. Her chakra control was good even before the exercise. The young time traveler smiled. Training the Pinkett reminded him of when he would unofficially train the Konohamaru Corps. To the surprise of nearly all of his friends, he took to the role of sensei rather easily. Silently he began thinking of ways to improve upon his new charge's ability. If memory served him correctly, she had little to no problem with the tree climbing exercise, and the next step to learn better chakra control would be water walking, but he felt that may be a bit extreme for her if she was starting on tree climbing tomorrow. He sighed before walking out of the room. Walking through the hallway that leads from the room Team 7's men shared, he walked down the stairs that lead to the living room and out the front door and sat on the front steps of the porch. He closed his eyes and let the cold night air of Wave Country soothe him as he meditated. Concentrating inwardly, the darkness of his inner world started to fade until the mental image of himself standing in front of a large wooden red door with ornate golden foxes carved onto the door hinges. Grabbing at the familiar door knob of his mindscape, he turned it and found that he couldn't, it was still locked to him. Outside of the cracks that littered the wall surrounding the door, it seemed untouched, much like it did when he first visited the door when he first received his future memories. He sighed before turning and exiting the mindscape. Naruto opened his eyes before looking up into the night sky. It made no sense. Why was he cut off from his mindscape? Why could he not contact Kurama? The blonde was so wrapped up by his internal thoughts that he didn't even notice his pink-haired friend approach him from behind. Penny, for your thoughts. He turned and glanced at Sakura as she sat down next to him on the stoop. He leaned back against the house, just thinking about what happened today. What do you mean? Naruto sighed. It's just, I am not strong enough. Even after all the training that he had put himself through after regaining his memories, he still wasn't as strong as he will be. Would he ever get that strong as he is now? He understood that without the ability to access Kurama's chakra at will, he couldn't access the techniques that he created utilizing his chakra. He couldn't even access his golden coke, and even then he wouldn't be able to use it like he once did. But he at least figured that he could handle a fight with Zabuza without having trouble. The blonde looked over toward his pink friend and smiled. You've come a long way since we graduated though. Sakura smiled at her friend's praise of her ability. It's only because you worried about me, she said before glancing down at the boards of the step below her. Thanks for that. If it wasn't for you, then I probably would have died when the demon brothers attacked. Besides, Sasuke-kun has started to look at me more. Naruto smiled. His actions were starting to change the future, he knew it. With a bit more pushing and the Pinkett will be able to fill the void in Sasuke's here, and slowly love will replace the need for vengeance in his heart. I didn't do it alone, because you want Sasuke-san to love you as much as you do him. That's why you're improving, so you can prove yourself to him. Came a voice behind them. Turning towards the door, they saw the bridge builder's daughter, Tsunami, peering out from the doorway. Dinner's ready, she said as she turned and walked back inside. The duo nodded and followed in after her. Glancing back towards the Pinkett, Naruto couldn't help feeling somewhat bad. This plan of his was essentially feeding her obsession for the Uchiha. He was using her to achieve a better future. He didn't like how that felt, but his more logical adult mind knew it was necessary. Morning came and Naruto's eyes fluttered open, the smell of freshly cooked food wafted through the air. The blonde looked around the plain beige room that he and the other males of Team 7 shared. Kakashi was already up and walking assisted with his crutch and Sasuke was still asleep on his futon. The blonde walked up next to the raven-haired boy and peered down at him with cold eyes. It would be too easy for Naruto to pull a kunai out of his pouch and dig it into the Uchiha's skull. Orochimaru wouldn't be able to give him his curse mark. Sasuke would no longer be a threat. Many would say that this was his chance, the best chance for him to enact his plan, the perfect time to be done with his mission and live out the rest of his second life in peace, or relative peace until the Akatsuki started to move. He held a kunai out in front of himself and watched the reflection of himself in its cold steel, his eyes cut towards Sasuke as the Uchiha turned over in his sleep. Naruto could only imagine what his team would think. Sakura would feel betrayed by the man she had come to call friend, and Kakashi would most likely either try to him for bringing him back to Konoha in chains. The old bastards on the council would send him to the gallows for sure. He shook his head and put the kunai away in his pouch. He couldn't do that. While Sasuke was his most hated enemy, even he deserved a chance at life. He may be arrogant and annoying, but life is life, and Naruto had no right to take it before that life had a chance to turn down the dark path. Rest assured, Sasuke Uchiha, the moment you do something unforgivable, your life is mine. Naruto placed a hand on the Uchiha's shoulder and shook him awake. Sasuke looked up at the boy through sleepy eyes. Dobi. What do you want? Time to get up, Naruto said as he tried to not sound annoyed at the name of Dobi. Breakfast should be ready and we have training. The Uchiha nodded and the duo made their way down the stairs where their other two teammates were. The Pinkett saw the two first and smiled. Kakashi saw this and turned to glance at his two students. Morning, you two. Morning, sensei. HN. Team 7 and the family sat down to eat. The lady of the house, Tsunami, had prepared a lovely breakfast of eggs and ham. After breakfast, the silent son of Tsunami walked off to his room, not before sending a slight glare Team 7's way. The look went unnoticed by the others, but Naruto had been paying extra attention to Inari ever since they had arrived. So sensei, Sasuke said as he sat on Kakashi's right. What will you be teaching us? The silver-haired Jonin shook his head. I'll tell you when we get there, he said as he began to stand but fumbled slightly. Sakura saw this and quickly moved under him. Kakashi grunted before grabbing at his crutch. I am fine, Sakura. Just gotta get used to walking with this thing. The team walked out of the house and into the dense woods behind it. Naruto watched in mild excitement as Kakashi explained the exercise. Tree climbing is simple once you get the hang of it. Simply channel chakra into the soles of your feet and walk up a tree. It's not only good for building up your control and reserves but also for building muscle mass since you're constantly defying gravity. If too much chakra is applied, then you'll shoot if the tree, if not enough, then you'll slide off. He watched as the Pinkett walked effortlessly up the tree. She was able to execute the exercise perfectly the first time, but this time, due to her extra training, she walked up the tree as if she was a seasoned shinobi. Naruto chuckled as he watched the prideful Uchiha fall off the tree and land on his head. Sasuke turned and glared at the blonde. Why don't you do it, Dobi? He said with a smirk, unless you're chicken. The blonde arched an eyebrow as he walked up to a tree with his arms folded. He glanced back towards the Uchiha and smirked before placing a single foot on the tree. And then the other. Sasuke sneered as he watched Naruto effortlessly walk up the tree and high-five Sakura when he reached the topmost branch. The blonde time traveler watched as the Uchiha attempted the exercise again only to fall on his head yet again. For Naruto, even though he hated Sasuke, it was still painful to watch. Sasuke-san, calm down, Naruto called from the branch he shared with Sakura. The Pinkett smiled as her friend offered her crush some advice. Just clear your mind and visualize your feet, Sakura shouted down to him. Anime and manga. Naruto nodded. Yeah, think of them as a cup and your chakra like water. Fill the cup, Sasuke-san. He stood upon the branch and pointed down at the Uchiha. Fill the cup. Sakura giggled and shook her head at the blonde's antics. Kakashi smiled underneath his face mask and shook his head. The analogy of filling a foot-shaped cup was an odd one, but Naruto was an odd boy. Sasuke growled softly but closed his eyes and visualized a glass. Visualizing a foot-shaped glass was just too weird for him. He started off filling just enough to cover the bottom of the glass before trying again. He slipped off after 3 steps, but it was progressing. Naruto smiled as he watched the Uchiha try again before falling again. He smiled. At the very least he was making fast progress and hopefully would have the exercise down by tomorrow so they could start on another exercise. While the blonde didn't want to feed Sasuke's ego, he did want him to grow stronger before the second phase of the Chunin exams. He would need it to defend himself against Orochimaru. The boy looked off into the horizon as he thought on the events to come. Orochimaru, one of the greatest S-ranked criminals that the village of Konoha had known since Madara Uchiha. During the Chunin exams, Sasuke was given the Snake Sanin's curse mark, which gave the Uchiha a taste of the power he had always craved, which had only made him crave even more, which led to him running to the snake bastard. Sakura noticed the look of intense contemplation on her blonde teammate's face. Naruto-kun, are you okay? Her sudden voice had snapped the Uzumaki out of his thoughts and the one activity that he had sworn he would never do. He was brooding. Not over his fate of having to relive some of the more difficult events of his younger years, or that he would have to re-kill the Akatsuki. No, he was brooding over the Uchiha. Nothing. Just thinking. She arched an eyebrow. About. Naruto shook his head. He was prepared for the Pinkett to ask and had an appropriate lie ready to use. He didn't know how he felt about how easy it was becoming to lie. I may have asked Ten-chan to marry me and she may have said yes. He couldn't tell his pink friend that he was thinking about the fate of the man she loved, the same fate that would lead to him said love interest. Besides, it's not like he wouldn't remarry her. In time. It'll just happen a little quicker than he would have thought. Sakura's eyes widened and she squealed in joy as she heard the news. She may not know much of the girl, but from the way Naruto talked of her, she was something special to him, and that she was an experienced weapon specialist. The Pinkett hugged the blonde in excitement. That's amazing. I am happy for you. Naruto smiled as the Pinkett pulled herself off him. He looked down and saw that Sasuke was halfway up the tree. Things were progressing well. Perhaps tomorrow they could get Kakashi to show them some jutsu that could help them with their future fights. The blonde looked off into the direction that he believed that Konoha was. She arched an eyebrow in confusion as Neji walked up beside her. Lee told us about your relationship with Naruto Uzumaki, the fate-believing man said. Tenten blushed before glaring at Lee. The bull-haired boy smiled and struck a cool guy pose. Guy stood up before clearing his throat, which gained the attention of his 3 charges. As much as I would like to congratulate young Tenten on this relationship, I am afraid we must continue on our journey to Suna. The bull-haired teacher said before the 4 of them. The young weapon mistress traveled at high speeds through the trees alongside her team with a smile on her face as she anticipated meeting with the Sand siblings again. However, Gaara would still be the murderous psychopath he was when they had first met him. Seeing Temari and Kankuro could be nice. Anime and manga. It wasn't long before they arrived at the gate of Suna. Halt, said Asuna Jonin as he approached the Konoha ninja. State your names and business. Guy strolled up to the Suna Jonin. The man looked apprehensively at the bull-haired man. My name is Misato Guy and these are my students Negi Hyuga, Tenten, and Rock Lee. We come to deliver an invitation to the Kazekage about the upcoming Chunin exams, he said with a smile. The man nodded before stepping aside. You can find Kazurkage-sama on the top floor of the tallest building, he said while pointing to a large sandstone building. Guy nodded and thanked the man before the team was moving again to deliver the message. As the group walked, Tenten was glancing around at the people in the marketplace. The vendors sold jewelry while others sold ninja tools. However, the merchandise wasn't what eventually caught her eye. Know that Honor was her future blonde friend Tamari. The wind mistress stood at a stall looking through the merchandise, each of her brothers on her flanks. The shop owner looked terrified, perhaps too scared to refuse service to anyone in the company of Gaara. The young weapon mistress glanced at the red-haired boy and was startled to find that he was staring at her. She smiled and waved nervously before running to catch up with her team. Unaware that Gaara's narrowed eyes were following her. Once they reached the Kage's office, she noticed the Suna leader sitting at his desk reading over paperwork. She hummed in amusement as she knew the true enemy of all Kage, paperwork. More than once Naruto had come home late for came home complaining about the mountain of paperwork that he had waiting for him once he opened the door. The sand leader looked up from his paperwork before putting the paper down. "Ah, Konoha nin," the man said. His voice seemed to radiate with power and his posture seemed to demand respect. "I was made aware of your arrival." "Yes, Kage-sama. We were sent to offer you an invitation to this year's Chunin exams held in Konoha," Guy said as he approached the man's desk. The leader nodded. "Very well. You may tell your Hokage that I accept his invitation." "Most youthful Kage-sama," Guy said before turning towards his team and smiled. "Now let us return to Konoha so we can inform Hokage-sama of this decision." The wind shadow stood. "No need. You all must be tired after your long journey. Please rest your heads for the night." "Are you sure, sir? We would hate to impose." The Kage simple nodded. Guy smirked. "Very well." He turned towards his genin. "What do you all think?" "Sure. My dogs are barking," Tenten said with a smile. She cared very little if she could stay in Suna or sleep in the forest. What she wanted to do was see Tamari again. Even if they weren't friends now, they will be with time. That, and she wanted to know why Gaara seemed to glare at her when she saw him at the market. "Might as well," Neji said flatly. He could care less. "It is most youthful of you to offer. I would gladly accept," Lee said with a glint in his eye as he struck a cool guy pose. Tenten lifted her shirt slightly and noticed a seal in the shape of a fox's head on her stomach. Was this the price she paid for being sent back in time? How long has this been noticeable? How Naruto seen it and not informed her about it? She glanced from her fox seal to the door. Gaara was coming. Did he know? Was he coming to her? Alright, but I have so many questions. Anime and manga. Then came the knocking at the door. The young Kunoichi narrowed her eyes at the door, knowing full well that the psychopathic Gaara was on the other side. She opened the door to see the red-headed Jinchuriki standing there with his two siblings. Well, if this wasn't a surprise, Tenten commented as the three Sand siblings walked into her room. "Who are you?" Gaara said. His voice sounded tired, more than likely due to the fact that the Shikaku won't let him sleep. "Why does mother want your blood?" Tamari and Kankuro looked shocked as they glanced from their younger brother to the bun-haired girl whose facial expression did not change after receiving a death threat from Gaara. Tenten smiled. "I didn't expect to see you so soon, Gaara of the Sand." The Suna Genin's brow furrowed. "How do you know my name? Are you an assassin?" She blinked before looking over his shoulder at Tamari before looking back to him. "Nope. I am here with my team to deliver a message to the Kage," she said with a soft smile. Gaara became frustrated and stamped his foot, which alerted his two siblings that something bad was about to happen. "Then how?" "Simple," the bun-haired girl said. "Kyuubi told me." This information seemed to stun the three genins of the Sand. Tamari, who had heard rumor of the Kyuubi, was afraid of its mighty power. For good reason. It was the strongest of all the Biju. Kankuro arched an eyebrow at this as he was taught that the fox had been by the fourth Hokage. Are you? It's Jinchuriki. Tamari asked in fear if Gaara could do so much damage as he could with only the one tail in him, then what could a person with the 9 tails do? Tenten shook her head. Sort of, she admitted. It wasn't like she could lie to her best friend, even if she had no idea you two were best friends. Tamari arched an eyebrow in confusion as she looked the girl up and down. Kankuro looked at his brother as Gaara started to grow frustrated with the bun girl. Besides, you needn't worry about me, it's my fiancé that you should worry about. Kankuro grew confused. What's that supposed to mean? Tenten smiled lovingly as she thought about her blonde soulmate. He's my other half in more ways than one. Gaara narrowed his eyes at the girl before storming off. His siblings followed closely behind him. Tamari placed a hand on his shoulder. Gaara-san, don't let her get to you, remember the plan. However, Gaara wasn't paying attention because Mother wanted her blood. He didn't know why, but one thing was for sure, that she was strong, far stronger than she was letting on. He could practically feel the Biju chakra. Tenten watched as the trio left until the sound of her rumbling stomach began to growl. She frowned before heading out for the local food stand. Walking out of the inn, she turned towards the small cafe next door, unaware she was being watched. Entering the building, she quickly noticed 2 of the 3 Sand siblings. Tenten smiled as she saw a slight smile on the face of the blonde. Kankuro and Tamari arched an eyebrow as the bun girl saw on the other side of the booth facing them, "Fancy running into you two, where's Gaara?" "He's out," Kankuro said while crossing his arms. "What do you want, bun girl?" Which earned him a glare from Tenten and an elbow to the ribs from Tamari for being rude. "The name's Tenten, future wife of Konoha's future Hokage," she said proudly. She looked at the 2 and frowned. "Do the cooks try to poison Gaara? Is that why he's not here?" "That's right. You did say something about a fiancé," Tamari said, recalling their earlier conversation at the inn. The weapon user nodded. "Why would they try and poison him?" The bun-haired girl looked into the wind mistress's eyes. "Because he's a Jinchuriki, ain't he?" The 2 Sand siblings stared at the Konoha kunoichi as if they had seen a ghost. No one outside of the village was to know Gaara's condition. "How do you know?" Kankuro said with a certain edge to his voice that alerted the 2 kunoichi that the wrong answer promised pain. Tenten smirked. "Living with a Jinchuriki, I've gotten pretty good at finding the others." She lied. Future knowledge was good for some things after all, that and having a fraction of the mightiest of the Biju inside of her helped. The Sand siblings paled. "There are others." Kankuro paled, knowing the destructive power Gaara possessed, and to imagine more people like him or even stronger than him was terrifying. "You live with one." Tamari seemed to fear this girl slightly more. If she could handle a Jinchuriki's psychopathic tendencies and still be as happy as she was, then something was seriously wrong with her. "Anime and manga, of course, we're engaged," she said as the waitress left, having received the young weapon mistress's order. Tenten turned to look back at the Sand siblings. Much to her secret amusement, they looked at her as if she had grown a second head. She arched an eyebrow and tilted her head to the left slightly. "What?" Tamari decided to answer as her brother seemed too shocked by the fact that this girl lived with someone like Gaara. Even for them who were his family, it was hard to be around him. Even if she hated to admit it, but she was afraid of her little brother. "How do you deal with it? I mean Gaara's quote. Psychopathic, homicidal, and nothing but angry." Tenten finished the blonde's sentence for her. Tamari nodded, and the Konoha ninja could see the look of guilt in her eyes. She didn't want to think of her brother like that. It hurt her more than anyone knew. "My Naruto-kun is nothing like that, even if he does have every right to be." Kankuro, who had broken from his stupor, looked at the girl. "What do you mean? Wouldn't you feel hurt if he, Yano, started being all cold and stuff?" She didn't know how to answer that. She adopted a thinking pose. Maybe if he attacks our friends or my two-san, she placed a hand on her chin. But the civilians and some shinobi deserve it. She looked out the window thoughtfully. He was an orphan, ya know, she said. Everyone old enough to remember the Kyuubi attack knew of his status and hated him for it and taught the children to hate him as well. The Sand siblings look at the girl with carrying emotions on their faces. Tamari felt bad for this Naruto person, if only because Gaara could have easily lived like that, hated by the village, hated by the children, but instead they feared him. In some ways to be feared is better than being hated. Tenten shook her head of the thought of the violence that was Naruto's childhood. Luckily meetings were minimal, but it truly was a sad existence to be ignored. He could have turned out just like your brother. How so? Konkuro asked. If he didn't have people who genuinely cared for him growing up, she shook her head. That little tidbit of information made the wind specialist think about their childhood with Gaara, how their father kept them separated from him along with the assassination on attempts. No wonder he turned out the way he had. The blonde time traveler lay there in the grass of the forest as he dreamed his dreams. The night prior he had blown up at young Inari for the words he spoke about suffering. He spent the rest of the night training and thinking about how he spoke to the boy and felt bad for yelling at him. It's just that it was so infuriating. Here he is complaining about suffering and loss while sitting in a warm and loving home eating an actual meal while people in this very village struggled to get what he has, some even going hungry tonight. Talking like he owns the rights to suffering while Naruto had spent countless nights alone, cold and hungry. Even Sasuke had more of a right to brood than he did. Naruto had woken slightly when he started to hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps. He kept his eyes closed and his face as neutral as possible but smiled internally because he knew it was Haku. He only opened his eyes when he felt the ice ninja poking at his cheek. He cracked open an eye. Oh, Haku said tentatively, I didn't mean to wake you. Naruto sat up before holding a hand over his mouth to hide his yawn. It's fine, really shouldn't be sleeping out here anyway. Haku stood up while holding his basket of herbs. What are you doing out here? Training. The long-haired man arched an eyebrow. Training, are you a ninja? Haku smiled slightly at hearing the boy's dream. It was nice to have a dream. Hokage, huh? Then you should know that to be strong what you need is someone to protect. Naruto finished for him. Haku nodded. So do you have that someone? The long-haired boy asked. Naruto nodded. It wasn't like he had just one person he was to protect but instead an entire village. Sure, he could say something cheesy and romantic about Tenten and it would be true. He would sooner die than let anything bad happen to her. Though she would probably kick his rear end all the way back to Konoha for saying such a thing. She was a fierce kunoichi whose skill with a blade was unmatched. The blonde looked at Haku. Can I ask you something? The brunette smiled. You just did. Naruto deadpanned at this and the boy chuckled. What is it? He said with a sweet smile. What's with the basket? Picking flowers, the blonde said with his hand cupped behind his head. Haku looked from him to the basket. I am collecting herbs, my friend, you see. They're sick. The blonde adopted concerned features. Well, I hope he's okay, which alerted Haku slightly. I didn't say it was a he. Though the fake hunter ninja kept his stoic expression as to not tip of his enemy that he didn't trust him. Thank you, I too hope he recovers quick. The blonde smirked as the fake hunter turned and started walking away. Though he tried his best to hide it, Haku's shoulders were rigid. Until next time, he said in a sweet voice, Hunter-san. This caused Haku to freeze momentarily as he slid his right hand into his left sleeve and retrieved some of his hidden senbon. In one motion he turned and unleashed the volley of deadly needles. Naruto jumped back. Whoa! Haku retrieved another set of senbon but did not lob them at the blonde. Naruto held both hands up in mock surrender. I am not looking for a fight, he said with a nervous chuckle. Haku narrowed his eyes. How is it you know I was the hunter nin? He said through gritted teeth. Naruto blinked. You'll be surprised at the things I know. He smiled, but when he saw that Haku hadn't relaxed, he sighed. I have a really good sense of smell. I can also smell Zabuza-san on you. Anime and manga. And what do you plan to do with the information of his continued existence? The brunette said, still ready to attack should the blonde make a move that he deemed as hostile. The blonde shook his head. Nothing. Besides, they already know. Besides, I have no intention of making enemies of either you nor one of the 7 swordsmen. Hearing the boy's words made Haku relax slightly but not drop his guard or put away his weapons, much to Naruto's chagrin. Suddenly inspiration struck. The young time traveler smiled. I have a proposition for you. When Haku went out to collect herbs to heal the mist swordsman's injuries, Zabuza didn't expect him to return with the same blonde that had fought against him. At first, Zabuza was furious, thinking that Haku had betrayed him, but soon discovered the reason for the blonde's arrival. I propose an alliance. Naruto spoke with an edge to his voice that seemed to command authority. The mist demon arched an eyebrow in confusion as he stared at the young genin. Not receiving a tongue lashing from the swordsman, Naruto continued, Stop coming for Tazuna-san head, and you too. He pointed from Zabuza to Haku. I can get you positions in Konoha's shinobi force. Haku looked at the boy through wide eyes for a moment before turning away. How could such a child offer such a thing? What power did he have to make such a claim? But that wasn't the only thing on the young ice wielder's mind, for Naruto said this with such confidence. Zabuza began to chuckle. No deal. Naruto frowned at this. We have a mission and your games will not get in the way of that. The blonde time traveler sighed. It's no game, Zabuza-san. Someone like Gato would never honor the price you've agreed upon. He'll sooner stab you in the back, he said. While I offer you salvation from the hunters that are tracking you and a place to rest your heads for the night. The swordsman scoffed. Gato's no match for me. If he tries, then he'll surely regret it. Naruto rolled his eyes at the man's overconfidence. Clearly, Naruto said after a moment, if you're at your best, that's why he'll only strike after the fight between you and my team when you're weak. Haku stared at the boy that stood next to him. What made this boy believe that Zabuza could be defeated, let alone be seen as weak? Though it was logical for a swine like Gato to strike when his opponent was at his weakest. Zabuza scoffed. You pathetic lot wouldn't even be a challenge for me. The blonde's left eye twitched slightly. Sure, he didn't think convincing Zabuza to disobey his current contract would be easy, but the man just making this hard for the blonde. Naruto lifted his arm, which made Haku twitch slightly as he went to grab his senbon. The blonde sighed and messages the bridge of his nose. So there's nothing I can say to convince you? Not a chance, the masked man snarled. I would sooner fall on my blade than work with Konoha. The boy scratched at the back of his head. Damn, I was hoping we could work together. Oh well, he said as his arm fell to his side and a kunai slid into his hand. Haku noticed this and in a quick motion volleyed a set of senbon that embedded themselves within the blonde's arm. Poof! Haku blinked as the blonde exploded into smoke. Naruto sighed as the memories of his clone began to come to him. Damn him, Zabuza was a stubborn fool. The blonde frowned as he cupped his hands behind his head. The plan to work with the duo of missing nin was a bust, undone by the ego and hubris of the man feared as a demon. He needed a new plan. The future cooperation of Zabuza and Haku could be tremendously helpful in his efforts to Sasuke. Naruto shook his head. Thinking about it wouldn't help him. If Zabuza was too much of a fool to ally himself with the blonde, then there was no skin off Naruto's nose. Glad you could join us, Naruto. The blonde's attention shifted from his thoughts to the man who spoke. Kakashi stood with Sasuke and Sakura to his flanks. The cycloptic man sighed. Now let's get to training. Sensei. The silver-haired Jonin glanced at his pink-haired charge. Can we train in something else? Naruto-kun and I already completed the exercise. The man hummed as he heard this. All right, he sighed. Naruto's eye twitched at the man's bored tone. Today we'll learn you elemental affinities. Naruto smiled as his eyes gained a bright gleam. Elemental manipulation was something he had just barely managed to scratch the surface of in his training. He couldn't train in it with the others around and have them grow suspicions of his exponential growth. But now he could train in his wind affinity without a care in the world. Anime and manga. Elemental affinity. What's that, sensei? Sakura asked with raised eyebrows. Kakashi's right hand disappeared into his kunai pouch and returned with 3 pieces of paper in his hand. Elemental affinities are something everyone who can use chakra is born with. There are 5 different affinities. Water, fire, wind, earth, lightning. He listed the 5 elements as he handed the genin a paper each. These papers are made from a special tree that can be used to test your affinities. Just channel some chakra into the paper and I'll let you what you get. Sakura stared at the man before turning her attention back towards the paper in her hand. Narrowing her eyes, she pulled upon the warmth that was chakra. Leading it through her body to her arm and finally into the paper, she watched in amazement as the paper seemed to crumble into dust. An earth affinity, Kakashi said with his trademark eye smile. Sasuke channeled some chakra into his paper. The parchment crumpled into a ball before being engulfed in fire. You're an Uchiha, so a fire affinity's a given, but to have a secondary lightning affinity is impressive. Sasuke smirked arrogantly and Naruto sighed as he saw it. The blonde already knew what his affinity was. Wind, nothing special, nothing more, just wind. One of the rarest affinities to have in Fire Country. He channeled chakra into the paper and stared in shock. Contrary to last time he learned of his affinity where the paper only slips in 2, this time the paper seemed to dampen significantly and split 3 times. Kakashi smiled under his face mask. Nicely done. Naruto, you have 2 strong affinities for water and wind, the Cyclops said. Naruto remained speechless as he stared at the damp pieces of chakra paper in his hand, completely oblivious to Sakura's congratulations. Why had he gained an affinity? Could it have been Kurama? Naruto furrowed his brow as he thought on this. The furball may have gifted him a secondary affinity when he transferred himself into the younger Naruto. He shook his head. No time to dwell on that. He would simply ask him when he saw him again. Kakashi cleared his throat, before making a hand sign Naruto had never seen him make. Before the genin knew what was happening, 2 other Kakashis poofed into existence. Naruto was awed that the man could perform the shadow clone jutsu. He had never done that before. Whoa, the blonde said, I didn't know you knew the shadow clone jutsu, Kakashi-sensei. The silver-haired man nodded. Of course, though I can't use it as you do. You simply have more chakra than I do. He said this idly without thinking and didn't notice the looks of shock that appeared on his other 2 students' faces. Now, each of you will go with a clone and will learn a jutsu for your elements. The Kakashis split up and took each of the kids. Naruto stood watching as his Kakashi took 2 scrolls from his vest. Alright Naruto, I'll be teaching you the wind bullet jutsu and water prison jutsu. Tenten strolled through the streets of Suna, basking in the cool air of the early morning. Today was the day of Team 9's departure, which was why she was out and about. Suna was known for many things like sand and its abundance of shinobi with the wind affinity, but neither of these things interested her at the moment. No, the reason she was in the street was to pick up Suna's famous jelly-filled dumplings. They were the weapon mistress's favorite treat in the future. If she let an opportunity to grab a couple dozen of them slip by, she would sorely regret it. Just the thought of the salty and crunchy exterior and sweat-juicy jelly interior made her mouth water. Tamari would often bring them when she came to visit for diplomatic reasons. In a few years, the small stand would expand, but in this time period, the stand was no bigger than Naruto's favorite ramen stand. The shopkeeper, an older man with rich brown eyes and matching hair, smiled at her. "Hello ma'am, what can I get you today?" "Anime and manga." Tenten smiled and took a sniff. The aroma of the dumplings filled her nostrils. "I would like 2 dozen of your jelly dumplings, please." The shopkeeper looked at her. All right," he stuttered out before going to work collecting her order. Tenten smiled in anticipation of the sweet and savory confection. She turned her back to the stall and watched as the people made their way through the street. Her smile widened when she saw Tamari. "Tamari-chan!" she exclaimed. The wind mistress turned toward the voice before walking up to the bun girl. "Morning," she said with a small smile. "Shouldn't you and your team be getting ready to leave?" The bun girl nodded. "They are. I am just getting some treats for the road." The Sand Kunoichi arched an eyebrow. "Treats? Yup. Buying 2 dozen jelly dumplings," she said as the man handed her 4 boxes that contained 6 dumplings each. She smiled before handing the kind shopkeeper his money. Tenten opened a box and handed Tamari a dumpling. "Want one?" Tamari accepted the treat before plopping it into her mouth. She smiled satisfactorily. "Delicious." The weapon mistress nodded her agreement as she popped one of the savory sweet confections into her mouth. Her and Tamari walked down the street and nibbled on the delicious treats. They passed many civilians, some shopping and others loitering. Tenten couldn't wait to get home and rest in her bed and get ready for the upcoming Chunin exams. This time around things would be different. This time the wind woman standing next to her wouldn't come out victorious. She was a Jinchuriki. Half Jinchuriki. Pseudo Jinchuriki. Whatever you call her, she was different from what she was then. The bun girl looked at the fan wielder that walked next to her. "So, you going to be participating in the Chunin exams?" Tamari nodded. "Yeah." Her eyes dropped slightly as she thought of how her brother, Gaara, wasn't someone that should be led around other people. "I can't wait to show you around," she said with excitement in her voice. Tamari glanced at her and smiled. "And don't worry about Gaara." "What makes you say that?" The Konoha Kunoichi swallowed another dumpling. "Naruto-kun will set him straight," she said with a tone of voice that made her sound so certain. Tamari didn't know what to make of this girl. Where did she get this confidence from, and why on earth would it be placed in a Jinchuriki? Tamari was about to speak but was interrupted by a boy wearing an all-green spandex suit. "Tenten-chan!" the boy exclaimed. "How is my most youthful teammate?" The Sand Kunoichi was taken aback by the boy's boisterous personality. If it bothers Tenten, she didn't show it. "I am fine, Lee-san. Are we ready to go?" Lee nodded vigorously before returning to the sight of what looked like an older clone of himself and a boy with the unmistakable eyes of the Hyuga. The bun girl turned to Tamari. "Welp, I am off," she said while handing the wind mistress another dumpling. "Till we meet in the Chunin exams." The Sand Kunoichi nodded. "You bet." Konoha's Team 9 left the village gates of Suna for their long journey home. Tenten couldn't help but be sad to be leaving her friend. She was all too accustomed to her living in Konoha. With a sigh, she joined her team up in the trees. Guy seemed to be smiling brightly as ever as he encouraged his youthful students. Lee seemed to be eating up every word of the man's tirade. Neji scoffed and glanced at Tenten. "What? You shouldn't be consorting with the enemy," the Hyuga said in a superior tone of voice. Tenten scoffed. She hated this Neji. "We were just talking. Besides, last I checked, Konoha and Suna were allies," she said before speeding ahead of him. The villages were allies, and coming soon that alliance would be tested. She hoped they could do something to stop it. Not likely. She was startled by the voice in her head. She almost forgot she contained a fragment of Kurama within her. Part of the yin chakra Minato severed from the Kyuubi before sealing its yang half into Naruto. "Anime and manga. What do you mean, not likely?" Kurama smirked from within the weapon's mistress's mind. Time is a delicate thing, it can only take but so much deviation before crumbling. Tenten thought on this as she and her team leapt through the trees leading to Konoha. Waking from the previous day's training, Naruto stared at the ceiling of the guest room. He blinked and rubbed the sleep from his eyes as he sat up. The first thing he saw was the lady of the house, Tsunami. "Morning, Tsunami-chan." The mother looked at him. "Sorry, did I wake you?" "Kakashi-san said you should rest. You came home pretty late last night," she said as she approached him. Naruto looked at her before looking out the window that he lay beside. "What time is it?" Tsunami arched an eyebrow and looked at a wall clock that hung just above the window. "Almost 10:30 a.m. The blonde nodded, thankful he hadn't overslept and missed Gato's thugs. He looked at the woman as she walked out of the room. He made a simple hand sign and a puff of smoke. Later, a Naruto clone stood directly next to him. "Protect them, the original order." Getting a nod from the clone, Naruto opened the window and jumped through it. Leaping from roof to roof, the blonde spotted the thugs he had beaten before. He moved slightly to intercept them but turned and moved back towards the bridge. This was the defining moment for Inari. These goons played a very important role in it and the blonde time traveler was not going to interfere with that. Approaching the bridge, Naruto could see the mist consume his friends. Thankfully the ice mirrors hadn't been erected. He smiled slightly at this, thanking Kami that he didn't have to infiltrate the dome again. "Thanks for waking me up," Naruto said once he arrived. Zabuza smirked as he saw the blonde. "Welcome to the party, Blondie." Naruto scowled at this. He did not like being called Blondie. "Not like one more genin will keep me froming you, lot." Naruto glanced from the mist demon to the boy in the fake hunter mask. His eyes glowed with resolve. "Hello, Zabu-chan." The bandaged man snarled at the boy as he took a stance. Haku's eyes softened behind his mask at the appearance of the blonde. His form brought back memories of his offer. Salvation from their pursuers, from the Mizukage's unjust bloodline war, a place to call home. However, Zabuza was a stubborn man that is very set in his way. The freedom to do what he wanted when he wanted, to when he wanted. No, he wouldn't surrender that for a place to belong. Making a single hand sign, Zabuza conjured up a heavy mist. Naruto, however, was prepared for as he weaved through hand signs. "Wind style. Great breakthrough," the blonde Jinchuriki exclaimed as he pushed his palms outward and a powerful gust of wind erased the mist. Kakashi leapt into action and engaged Zabuza. Haku went to aid his master but was interrupted as Sasuke hurled a great fireball at the boy. "Nice, Sasuke-san," Naruto said as he watched the Ravenet N. The masked ninja stood kunai against kunai with the lone Uchiha. His eyes narrowed under his mask as he watched the blonde approach. With a deep breath, he was thankful that the rain from the night prior had been as heavy as it was. Kakashi watched in amazement as the fake hunter weaved through hand signs using only a single hand. It was uncommon for this to be done and it took much concentration to do. One had to be extremely focused or be very familiar with the jutsu, ice style, thousand Senbon of death. Kakashi's one visible eye widened. Ice style was a Kekkei Genkei of the Yuki clan of Kurigakure no Soda. He had heard that the entire clan had been due to the 4th Mizukage's bloodline civil war. The leader feared the shinobi of these special bloodlines and sought to destroy them all. The cycloptic Jonin moved to aid his genin but was then stopped as Zabuza lunged toward him with his oversized blade. Kakashi blocked said blade with a kunai. "Not so fast, Hatake." Zabuza smirked behind his bandages. "Your fights with me." The silver-haired Jonin watched helplessly as the ice needles barreled down toward his student. Sasuke glanced around before gritting his teeth and closing his eyes. "Come on, Sasuke," he thought to himself, "remember the training, draw on my chakra." He focused inward, searching for the warmth that was his chakra. The Ravenet's eyes opened wide as he pulled upon the warmth. Remember the academy. Chakra can be used for many things, such as increasing physical abilities. Sakura watched as her longtime crush was helpless to dodge the ice needles. Haku sneered underneath his mask. He hated Ing, absolutely detested it, but to complete the mission and protect his master he had to force himself to take life, or so he thought. Suddenly Sasuke appeared at his backside. Seems you're not as fast as you think. Sasuke kicked the fake hunter away. Haku twirled as his trajectory slowed. Naruto saw this and made a single hand sign before another Naruto popped into existence. The two blondes nodded at each other. The original clenched his fist tightly as he channeled as much Biju chakra into his fist as possible. The clone slid underneath a now standing Haku before turning on the masked shinobi and went to strike the brunette. However, Haku anticipated this and blocked the strike with his palms. The clone smirked and poofed out of existence, and the original struck with his Biju-enhanced fist. The boy jumped away in surprise as the blonde's fist made contact with the bridge. The ground splintered as Haku cursed himself for letting his guard down around Naruto. Rookie mistake, he scolded himself. From his position with Zabuza, Kakashi smiled underneath his face mask. Naruto had grown since they had become a team greatly. His strategy was sound. The fake hunter had already noticed him, and since the blonde's true skill set was still unknown to the enemy, he had created a shadow clone to distract the masked shinobi, and when he was distracted he struck. It was a sound strategy that would have worked if his opponent was anyone else. However, this shinobi had mountains more experience than Naruto did. "Don't take your eyes off me," Zabuza exclaimed as he swung the behemoth's sword. Kakashi ducked to strike. "Wouldn't dream of it," the silver-haired Jonin said. The mother saw this. "Inari-chan," she exclaimed, gaining the attention of everyone in the room. "Don't move, I can't have you getting hurt." "But, Ka, listen to your Ka-san, kid," the ashen-haired man said. He smirked as he placed a hand on the hilt of his sword. "You wouldn't want to get hurt." He unsheathed an inch of the blade. "Would you?" "Childcare. Stop," Tsunami shouted. If you hurt him, swear I'll bite my tongue off," the young mother said, hoping beyond hope that they valued her as a hostage enough not to attack her son. The man resheathed his blade with a satisfying click. "It's your lucky day, kid," the man said. "We need her alive, so you should be thanking her." The shirtless man narrowed his eyes in annoyance. "Man, this isn't enough. Relax, you just tried out your new sword. You should be satisfied." The eye patch-wearing man scratched his bandaged stomach. "Boar blood is unfit to christen a fine blade," the man said as he turned towards Tsunami. "Though I wouldn't mind christening my blade with her juices," the man said with a perverse grin as he went to grab the woman. Tsunami flinched away, and just as she did, a three-pronged kunai embedded itself within the man's hand. The shirtless man pulled his arm back in pain. "What the hell? If you dare touch her," said a voice from the corner of the room. The thugs, including Inari and Tsunami, looked in the direction of the voice only to find Naruto standing there with hate in his eyes. Naruto Uzumaki was many things: Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, proud holder of the title prankster from hell, time traveler, future husband of Tenten. But there was one thing no one could dispute. Naruto Uzumaki hated rapists to the very center of his core. "All you," Naruto said as he summoned a small portion of Kurama's chakra. The young Jinchuriki flashed awe of existence before reappearing in front of the man. His right hand gripped the kunai of his father while in his left was a fully charged Rasengan. The shirtless man was sent spiraling through the hole he cut into the side of the house. The ashen-haired man glanced from the path his friend had been shot out of to the boy who had attacked them. Quickly he went to grab at his sword, but stopped when he felt a fist impact itself with his stomach. He fell to Naruto's Biju-enhanced strength. "Naruto ni," Inari said as he stared in awe at the blonde who had saved his mother. Tsunami was doing the same with soft eyes and a wide smile. She was beyond thankful to the young blonde for not only saving her son but herself as well. Naruto turned toward the mother and son. You guys wouldn't have any rope, would you? Naruto watched over Haku's shoulder as Kakashi's hand glowed and the air around it crackled with electricity. This was the copycat ninja's only original jutsu, Chidori. Naruto stood above Sasuke. The young Uchiha looked like a pin-cushion wad with all the senbon sticking out of him. The blonde lunged at Haku. Kunai clashed with the fake hunter's senbon with an audible clang. It's a shame, Haku-san. We could be friends. The boy smiled underneath his mask. I would have liked that, he admitted. Perhaps in another life. There was a pregnant pause. I would have liked a home. Naruto smiled. Then why fight me? You don't have to be on the run anymore. The fake hunter shook his head. My life belongs to Zabuza-sama, he saved me. Haku pulled his senbon away before taking a single step backward and removing his mask. Where I come from, I'm hunted because I possess a bloodline. He saved me from that hell. Haku smiled at Naruto before turning around and rushing to Zabuza's side. Naruto's eyes grew panicked. He couldn't let it happen again, not again. Naruto grit his teeth as he felt himself draw upon Kurama's chakra. He felt his teeth grow and sharpen into fangs, his fingernails elongating into claws. Weaving through hand signs, water style, syrup trap, the blonde exclaimed as the water around them rose from the ground and gathered at his arms. He thrust his hands forward and the water stretched out and clung to Haku. The brunette's eyes widened before he tried to freeze the water that clung to him. As he tried, he saw this aura of red that surrounded Naruto travel from himself to the water. This aura was hot enough to prevent him from freezing the water. He turned and saw Kakashi's Chidori approach Zabuza. His eyes widened in fear before he threw a senbon as quickly and accurately as he could. He smiled thankfully as the senbon found its target in the Konoha Jonin's neck. Silence overtook them all as Haku fell to the ground. The red aura had started to encase him, and to his surprise, it wasn't as hot as it at first appeared. Then he felt a headache of unknown origin as he saw memories, not his own. Haku! Zabuza shouted to no avail. Haku wasn't responding to the man's orders. Clap, clap, clap. The group turned to face the source of the noise and saw a group of mercenaries, and in the center of the group was a short, plump man. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he saw the man that had led Wave Country into poverty. Gato smirked as he glanced at the bandaged man. Well, well, well. Look at the so-called demon, beaten by children. Zabuza snarled. Gato, what's the meaning of this? The short round man looked to his small army of thugs and back toward the bandaged man. Business, Zabuza, for what I am paying you I can afford all these men. He pointed his thumb behind him. So I decided to cut my losses. Zabuza's teeth ground together under his bandages. Glancing to his left, he saw the young blonde he had spoken with yesterday. Looks like we're no longer enemies. Looks that way, Naruto said as he walked up to Zabuza. I think I'll hold my I told you so for later, the blonde said, which earned him a slight chuckle from the missing nin. The young time traveler bent over and picked up Haku before smiling at him. Looks like we're friends again, Haku smiled underneath his mask as Naruto helped him up. The brunette moved to remove his mask. Looks like it, he said as he threw the mask to the side. Sorry about your comrade. Anime and manga. Naruto shook his head. Don't worry about it, he's not worth being sorry over. The blonde said this last part as he turned back toward the group of thugs. He missed the questioning look Haku gave him. Blondie! Zabuza exclaimed as he bit through the bandages that covered his mouth. Naruto was seriously beginning to hate being called that. Give me a kunai. Naruto walked over to the man known as the Demon of Blood Mist Village and placed the hilt of the kunai in his mouth. Zabuza gripped the metallic weapon with his teeth. Naruto sighed as he wished Haku had incapacitated Kakashi sooner so Zabuza could have feeling in at least one arm. I so don't want that kunai back. Naruto eyed the group of thugs and let out a breath. He arched an eyebrow as he visibly saw the breath he took. It wasn't cold enough for his breath to be visible. He turned and looked at Haku. The brunette looked at him with a questioning gaze. The young ice ninja looked at the blonde confused but slightly startled. He hadn't been using his ice techniques, so why was his breath visible? Haku glanced down at the bridge underneath their feet and was startled to see that the small water puddles around Naruto's feet were frozen. Brat! Zabuza started gaining the attention of the two younger ninjas. Gato's mine, he snarled as he charged forward. His arm flailed behind him limply as he approached his target. Gato's eyes widened in fear as he took a step backward. Kill him, he exclaimed in terror as he turned and ran to the back of the group. Two thugs smiled and stepped in the path of the mist demon before trying to draw their swords. However, Zabuza hadn't been made one of the 7 swordsmen for nothing. He plunged the kunai into the stomach of the man to his left and ripping upward before turning to the other. He eyed the man before turning back toward the midget tyrant. Haku had engaged the man before his master had the chance to. Naruto smirked. Glancing behind him, he saw Tazuna standing over and knelt Sakura as she wept for the unconscious Uchiha. Turning back, he charged in and blocked a man's sword as it was about to strike the demon of the mist. Nah, the young blonde said as he pushed the man's sword aside with a kunai. Zabu-chan's busy at the moment. I would ask you to leave a message. The time traveler nailed the man between the eyes with his kunai. But you're already dead. Gato made his way to the edge of the bridge before grasping his knees and panting before turning around only to see his men being flung about by the 3 men. He paled when he saw Zabuza approaching him with incredible speeds. Demon. The man lunged toward the tyrant with kunai in mouth, stabbing into his plumb stomach. He ripped upward. Gato coughed up blood as the kunai was removed from him. Clutching at his chest, he felt the warm red liquid seep through his fingers. Why? You bastard, said as he stumbled to the side. If you have a death wish, don't drag me down. 2. Zabuza stood at his full height only to have several swords and spears plunged into his back. The man's mouth leaked blood, but he wasn't done. Gato was still alive, so that meant his job was not done. He lunged towards the man and sliced diagonally across his chest before kneeing the man in the stomach, which threw him off the bridge and into the water's bellow. The men behind the missing nin stared at the man known as the demon with fear. He had justed Gato, one of the most feared and influential men in all of the elemental nations. Zabuza turned and the remaining men that were still alive parted to make a path for the man. The man wandered toward the blonde Jinchuriki. Naruto stared in shock as the man collapsed in front of him. Zabuza-sama, Haku exclaimed as he ran to his master's side before his hands glowed with green chakra. The demon shook his head before Haku could sully his hands with his blood. No Haku-san, he said weakly, I am not gonna make it. Zabuza-sama, please, Haku pleaded with the man he saw as a father. There's still time. Zabuza shook his head before he coughed up blood. Blondie. Naruto heard this and walked over to the man before crouching at his side. The ex-Kiri ninja glanced to his side where the blonde was looking at him with concern etched onto his face. Does your offer still stand? Naruto's eyes widened before he looked up at Haku's weeping form. The brunette had his eyes clenched as he shook slightly. Losing one's precious person is never easy. It was a feeling Naruto knew all too well when he witnessed the deaths of the villagers in his future. He glanced at the dying man. Yes, Zabuza-san, want you to grant me my last wish. The young time traveler nodded. Haku deserves a home, the man panted. Deserves a place to belong. Naruto nodded. Of course, Zabuza-san. He shed a single tear for the man who had once been his enemy. He may not have known the man outside of this mission and his bingo book entry, but the death of anyone is cause for sadness. Zabuza smiled contentedly as the rise and fall of his chest ended as a single tear cascaded from the man's left eye. Standing at attention was the group known as Team 7 as their sensei gave the Hokage the report about their C-rank turn A-rank mission. Naruto watched as the elderly man read through the report Kakashi had given him before glancing to his right and seeing Haku, the ice shinobi who had been entrusted to him by the dying missing nin known as Zabuza. The blonde couldn't wait to return home to his and Tenten's apartment for some well-deserved rest and relaxation. This is quite the report, Hiruzen muttered before cupping his hands over his desk. The elderly man looked over the 4 children in front of him. Naruto smiled at the man before glancing back at Haku. The former missing nin was standing stark still with an emotionless stone face. If anyone hadn't seen the rich earthen pupils, they would have mistaken him for a Hyuga. Sakura smirked while blushing as she looked at Sasuke from the corner of her eyes. The young Uchiha stood emotionless as ever in front of the Hokage. I suppose congratulations are in order, the elderly Hokage said as he placed his pipe in his mouth. You may be genin, but you held your own against unknown odds. Naruto subtly shook his head. Unknown odds? No odds were unknown to him. Hiruzen took a puff of his pipe before exhaling the smoke. You 3, he pointed to Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi, are dismissed. The Hokage turned toward Naruto and Haku. You 2, stay. Sakura glanced at the blonde with worry in her eyes. Naruto saw this and nodded, signaling the pink that he would be alright. The young Kunoichi nodded before leaving the room behind Sasuke and Kakashi. Now, the Hokage said once the other 3 had left. What do we do with you? Naruto stepped forward. Gigi-chan, the blonde started. Zabuza-san asked for me to look after him. I intend to do just that. Hiruzen nodded. Yes, the report mentions something about a final request. What I want to know is where should we put Mr. Yuki? Haku Yuki. Right, Haku-kun. We can't allow a member of this village to be without a home, the elderly Hokage said. He can stay with me, Naruto chirped. Hiruzen looked into the eyes of the young Jinchuriki. From my understanding, you're living with your girlfriend. How do you expect to accommodate for the extra person? Naruto looked back at Haku. He couldn't let him be sent elsewhere in the village. That's when he remembered it, his birthright, the Namikaze estate. We can move into Two-san's estate. The declaration surprised Hiruzen. To move Naruto, Tenten, and Haku into the Namikaze estate, it would mean revealing to the village Naruto's true heritage. While Hiruzen liked the thought of seeing all the people who have hurt or mocked the young blonde beg for forgiveness, this would also mean Minato's enemies outside of the village would know. He sighed. He knew it was only a matter of time till Naruto asked for his birthright. Very well, Hiruzen stated. However, you can't move until after I announce your heritage to the council. Naruto nodded. Haku looked between them, wondering why the blonde would need permission to move into his father's house. Then you may move yourself, Haku-kun, and your girlfriend in. Naruto nodded before he and Haku started walking toward the door. The ice ninja walked through it before the blonde turned back toward the elderly Hokage. Oh, and she's not my girlfriend. Hiruzen arched an eyebrow. She's my fiancé, he said, walking out of the room. Hiruzen stared at the place Naruto had once been. Break. Walking through the streets of Konoha was the young weapon mistress, the future Tenten Uzumaki. She smiled as the apartment she shared with her soon-to-be husband again came into view. In her hands was a katana her father made for Naruto as an early wedding. Sheath of the blade was a calming midnight blue, while the hilt of the sword was wrapped in orange-stained leather with a black cloth tied around it. Pinned to the side was a small metallic Uzumaki symbol. Walking through the front door, the young girl noticed 2 pairs of shoes. She arched an eyebrow before shrugging, walking into the house. Entering the living room, Tenten noticed a very pretty girl sitting on her couch. Her right eye twitched. Who was this girl and what is she doing in her and Naruto's apartment? Hello, the girl said. The weapon mistress looked at her with narrowed eyes. All right, came the voice of Naruto as he walked back into the living room. The blonde glanced over and saw Tenten was home. Oh, Ten-chan. Welcome home. Naruto walked over and planted a kiss on her cheeks, much to the weapon mistress's delight. So love, he stated, what's with the sword? Tenten held the sword up for her husband to take. To-san made it for you. The blonde took the blade in hand. He removed the blade from its sheath and saw the blade had the kanji for fire engraved at the base. Wow, he said as he looked at the blade. He resheathed the blade. Remind me to thank him, next time I see him. The bun-haired girl nodded before turning back to Haku. So, are you going to introduce us or what? Koi, Naruto said softly, this is Haku-kun. The girl nodded. She had been told of the young ice user, however she never expected him to look so feminine. He'll be staying with us from now on. Also he's a boy. Tenten looked at Haku, who in turn smiled and waved. The girl smiled back. Nice to meet you, Haku-kun. Haku bowed. Likewise, Tenten-san. The bun-headed girl smiled before taking Naruto by the arm and leading him into the kitchen. The blonde looked at the girl with confusion etched on his face. Naruto-kun, what's Haku-kun doing here? She whispered as to not alert the young ice ninja. He should be dead. The blonde time traveler nodded. Yeah, about that. He chuckled nervously and rubbed the back of his head. I kind stopped him from getting. Naruto-kun, she exclaimed a bit louder. Haku glanced at the two and began to get confused. The incredibly dangerous, time is a fragile thing. We can't be going around and altering everything we want. The blonde arched an eyebrow. When did you become so sage-like? I retained the yin half of Kurama, remember, she said as she poked the side of his head lightly. He says if we alter too much we could end up ruining everything. Naruto hummed. In truth he did forget. His half of Kurama had been dormant from him until fairly recently. Flashback. Naruto opened his eyes once he heard the familiar sound of water dripping. His surroundings were that of the sewer that made up space in his mind that was reserved for housing the most powerful of Biju. Walking down the familiar corridors, he eventually found what he was looking for, large red wooden bars that made up the cage that contained Kurama. Hey, Kurama! Naruto exclaimed in excitement. The fox cracked open an eye and smirked as he saw his young friend. It's good to see you. It is, Kurama stated. To think my other half's crazy plan actually worked, the fox chuckled. Yeah, the blonde said as he gazed up at his friend. Can't believe I thought Ten-chan would me. Kurama laughed. Indeed, I was watching the exchange. Then why am I only hearing from you now? The giant fox shook his head. I had to break through the mental barriers that prevented us from making contact, Kurama explained. Breaking through the mental barriers was difficult. He almost cursed Minato for putting them up. However, if he didn't, Naruto would have ended up like Gaara. Now all that's left is the seal that separates us. Naruto smiled as he walked forward toward the paper seal that held the cage shut. As he grabbed the corner of the seal, he felt a hand grip his arm. Glancing over, he smiled as he saw him. Hello, To-chan. Minato Namikaze smiled as his son turned toward him before embracing him in a hug. Naruto-kun, I am glad I get to see you again, Naruto added. Minato broke the embrace as he looked his son up and down. He looked as if he was growing up well. Yeah, I am aware of your circumstance. The blonde father looked up to Kurama, who sat behind the bars. Thank you for saving my son. The fox shook his head. You should be thanking my other half, it was his idea, not mine. Yeah, came a voice from behind them. Naruto and Minato looked up and smiled as they saw Kushina Uzumaki. I don't think I like how much you've been lying, Naru-chan. Ka-chan, the young blonde said as he walked up to her before she glomped him in a bear hug. Minato's sweat dropped at the duo in front of him, thankful this was the boy's mindscape, because if this was the real world, Naruto's bones would have broken. I am happy. The elder blonde smiled before glancing up at the once been the scourge of the shinobi world turned his son's dearest and closest friend. Is this really necessary? Naruto glanced back at the man, his resolve evident in his azure blue eyes. Yes, he said sternly, the crimes of Sasuke Uchiha are irredeemable. I've given him every chance and continue to give him every chance. The young Uzumaki walked to his father. If he betrays the village again, I will him. But to someone so young, Kushina said as she walked up behind him. Naruto shook his head. When you were sworn in as Hokage, he looked into his father's eyes. What was the oath you made? The man smiled. To protect the village. Whether it be to injury or death, the seventh Hokage finished for him. Minato smiled with pride. I am still alive, so I am not done yet. The elderly man ruffled his son's hair. Kushina's eyes glowed with pride. Kurama looked at the three as they shared their moment. His young Jinchuriki had really devoted himself to the role they now play. The Uchiha's actions lead to the death of hundreds, if left unchecked maybe thousands, Kurama stated, which gained him the attention of the three humans. If he starts down the path of darkness, we will him. The fox looked at the young blonde. Together. Naruto smiled up at the fox as he walked toward the seal. Gripping onto the paper seal, he ripped it off the door, successfully unsealing the gates. The large wooden gates flew open as the fox's red chakra mingled with the boy's own blue chakra. The blonde felt the amazing rush of power for the second time in his 2 lifetimes. This time, however, he had the chance to truly appreciate the experience. It was as if something in him was swelling up and bursting outward into the golden chakra coat he had once worn at the end of the 4th Great Shinobi War. Minato looked upon his child with pride in his eyes. Kushina smiled as both the image of herself and her husband disappeared from Naruto's mindscape. Break. Yeah, Naruto mumbled as he and Tenten walked back into the living room where they rejoined Haku. The couple looked at the ice ninja before looking at each other, a silent agreement passing between them. Haku-kun, Tenten said, gaining the attention of the feminine-looking male. There's something you should know. What would that be? Naruto took a seat on the couch next to Haku. Do you know what a Jinchuriki is? The ice ninja nodded. Of course, he knew what a Jinchuriki was. After all, the current Mizukage was one. He was the reason Haku was nearly, the reason he was forced to. 13 years ago the Kyuubi attacked this village. Haku nodded as to signal Naruto he was following along. In order to stop it, my father sealed it, in me. Haku was surprised. A Jinchuriki ruins his life and here he was living with one. I need a moment, he said as he got up and walked into the guest room. This was a delicate situation for the young ice boy as he had always held distance for Yagura who had started the bloodline purge. He was a Jinchuriki. He was a monster. Naruto is a Jinchuriki, but the blonde's Haru's friend, he accepted him into his home without a second thought. Looking at the door Haku had just fled behind, Naruto was silent. He wanted Haku to understand that he was more than a Jinchuriki, that he was his friend. If not, blonde turned to his bun-haired wife. Think I should have waited until after I told him about the future stuff. Break. The elderly Hokage sighed as he leaned back in his chair. Time sure flies in when one is busy. It felt like only yesterday that the Konoha 9 graduated from the academy and already the Chunin exams were beginning. Hiruzen watched as the Jonin walked through the doors of his office. Greetings everyone, the old man said as he placed his pipe onto the desk. As you all know, that time of year has come again. Yeah, a Jonin in the crowd exclaimed, I saw the foreign genin arrive early this morning. The aging Hokage nodded, yes, so which of our own genin are capable of taking this exam? The Jonin looked at each other before Asuma Sarutobi stepped forward. I Asuma Sarutobi, Jonin Sensei of Squad 10 nominate Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Naru, and Choji Akamaiki for the Chunin selection exams. Everyone looked at the chain smoker with wide eyes. Kakashi smirked under his face mask. I Kakashi Hatake, Jonin Sensei of Squad 7 nominate Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto Uzumaki, and Sakura Haruno for the Chunin exams. Yush! Exclaimed the ever-youthful Maida Guy. I Maida Guy nominate my youthful students as well. Everyone's sweat dropped at the man's exuberance. Uruka stared wide-eyed at the Jonin nominated their students, guy he understood since they had a full year of training, but the others. I Kurenai Yuhi nominate my Genin squad Hinata Hyuga, Shino Aburame, Kiba Inuzuka for the Chunin selection exams. Now wait just a moment, the crowd turned toward the source of the proclamation to find that it was Uruka Yumino. Forgive my rudeness, but those names that were just called. I know them and they are definitely not ready for these exams. Kakashi sighed, Uruka-san, they are ready. I myself took these exams when I was no older than them. They're not you, the academy teacher exclaimed. Kakashi shook his head, no, they're better. This confused Uruka as he had been in charge of their training for 6 years. When they graduated he knew neither of them was ready for something like this. Amongst my own team, Naruto's grown quite a lot, some shinobi quirked an eyebrow as the man talked. Naruto Uzumaki, the most unpredictable knucklehead ninja, has grown up. It was almost unheard of. He's even taken it upon himself to help his teammate, Sakura Haruno, with her shortcomings, and Sakura's better for it. Others smiled at the thought of the young hero committing himself to teamwork so readily that he would help with the development of his teammate. Uruka, not seeing a way to poke a hole through his logic, sat down in a chair. He refused to believe these kids were ready. Look, Kakashi continued, if you don't believe me, test them yourself. I guarantee you'll be surprised by the people you meet. Oh, he will indeed. Break. Sparring was a great way to pass the time, which is why the genin of Squad 7 was having a light spar with Sakura to warm up for the day. As Sasuke watched, the blonde ducked a chakra-enhanced punch. He could practically hear her fist humming with chakra. The young time traveler struck her lower stomach before sliding around her. The pinkett disengaged the blonde and held her side as she channeled chakra to the afflicted area in order to heal the soreness. Damn it, Sakura said faintly. That was good, Naruto said while panting. You got faster. Sasuke watched the two. The young Uchiha may have had his differences with the Uzumaki boy, but he would be lying if he said he didn't acknowledge the boy's strength. So finding out that the pink-haired Kunoichi had become strong enough to give Naruto a challenge was something to brag about. The Uchiha rose from his spot and walked over to the duo. Naruto noticed this, cutting his eyes at the Uchiha. What's up? I want to spar, Sasuke said with determination in his eyes. Naruto sighed before stepping forward. The Uchiha shook his head. Not with you, Dobi, with her. Me, Sakura stuttered out. I can't. She shook her head fervently. I'm just barely strong enough to challenge Naruto-kun. No way will I be able to beat you. The blonde internally sighed at this. His current strength was far superior to the Uchiha. With the added boost of his and Kurama's partnership, he could take on Kakashi with some difficulty. He grabbed Sakura by the arm and pulled her away. Sakura-chan, you need to have more confidence in yourself, he told her. You're really strong, you could push Sasuke-san no problem. Sakura looked at him before turning back to Sasuke and turning back toward the blonde. She was still unsure and it was clear for the young blonde to see. Sakura-chan, he said softly so Sasuke couldn't hear him. You want him to notice you, right? The pinkett nodded. Well, this is your chance, show him how strong a woman you are. Right, she said with a newfound determination in her voice. Thanks, Naruto-kun. She turned back toward Sasuke. Alright Sasuke-kun, you're on. Break. Arriving at the training ground to meet his team, Kakashi Hatake came across a sight he never expected to see. Naruto was sitting on a boulder watching intensively as Sakura and Sasuke sparred. He saw the young pinkett slam a first into the Uchiha's outstretched palm. Sasuke smirked before leaping backward in order to create distance before running circles around the young Haruno. Seeing this, Sakura did something he hadn't thought possible for her. She threw a powerful punch into the ground, sending shockwaves into the very earth they stood upon and splintering it. All right, Kakashi exclaimed, making his presence known. That's enough. The three genins walked over to their sensei expectantly. Hey sensei, Naruto greeted, what are we doing today? More missions? Nope. Are we learning new jutsu? Sasuke asked. Again Kakashi shook his head. Maybe more advanced chakra control exercises. Sakura guessed. No, Kakashi said, all good guesses but alas none of you got it right. In fact, I've signed you three up for the upcoming Chunin exams. Walking into the room that housed the first phase of their exams, Naruto was hyper-aware of all the murderous looks their fellow exam takers were giving them. Sakura had a look in her eyes that was an odd mixture of concern and determination. He smiled at this and patted her on the shoulder. He liked that look in her eyes. It showed that she was confident in her ability to pass and showed that she wasn't unlike their third teammates. Sasuke Uchiha, both Sakura's childhood crush and Naruto's worst enemy, the Uchiha had an arrogant look in his eyes that spoke of how superior he was compared to the rest of these genin. Anime and manga. Sasuke-kun. Came the ear-piercing shriek of one Ino Yamanaka as she glomped onto the object of her affection. Naruto sighed and shook his head. I suppose some things never change. Ino pig. Get off of Sasuke-kun, Sakura exclaimed. Yes, some things never change. Even after all the training and progress they had made in making Sakura a splendid kunoichi in hopes of garnering the affections of the last Uchiha and subsequently keeping him from breaking all ties with the village, after all that Sakura is still a fangirl in some aspect. Oh forehead girl, I see they let you in, Ino said as she took her hands off Sasuke and placed them on her hips as she taunted Sakura. I see they'll let anyone enter these exams. Speaking of anyone, where's that loser dead last? This got Sakura angry, not solely because she insulted her but because she insulted her best friend. Naruto had selflessly sacrificed his spare time, which he could have used to better his own training or spend more time with his fiancée, but instead spent it correcting her own skills. The pinkett was about to say something in defense of her friend but was stopped by a hand on her shoulder courtesy of Naruto. The blonde time traveler didn't want a fight between the two breaking out, especially not in a room full of enemies. So to end the argument he placed a hand on Sakura's shoulder and shook his head. The pinkett backed down, fully understanding that Naruto could protect himself. My, Ino-chan, I can't believe you've forgotten me, the boy said, gaining the attention of the group, and here I thought what we had was special. The girl in question was speechless at the sight of her fellow blonde. Was this Naruto? Where was the hideous orange jumpsuit? While the boy in front of her did have Naruto's spiky blonde hair, sapphire blue eyes and those whisker marks on his cheeks, his outfit was something that was very unlike the Naruto she had last seen at the academy all those months ago. The boy wore a black sleeveless muscle shirt that hugged his body a little too well for Ino's comfort. Over the shirt he had a dark green jacket that cut off just above his navel. He wore black Anbu issue pants with similarly black ninja sandals. The only shred of orange on him was an armband he wore on his right arm just under his shoulder. Naruto, is that you? The boy nodded. When did you get so ripped? Naruto tilted his head in confusion as to how he should answer this. Sure, yeah, or could say he busted his ever since they graduated, and while that was true they would ask why, and frankly he couldn't get into it. Hard to show muscle, while wearing a baggy jumpsuit. A boy walked up to them, troublesome, the pineapple-headed genin said. What's with the whole change? What happened to the orange monstrosity? Naruto hummed in aggravation. My fiancé burned them. This was not a lie. When they had moved into the Namikaze estate, she had set the lot of them on fire with a fire jutsu the first chance she got. The remark about a fiancé got everyone's attention. Sakura shook his head. It wasn't so bad, Naruto-kun. Ino's eyes widened. You can still wear orange, just not a kill me orange full body outfit. The boy in question rubbed at the back of his head. I suppose. If he had planned on continuing his sentence, no one knows, for they were interrupted by a hard thud as a head of platinum blonde hair fell hard. Ino had fainted, and to everyone but Hinata they had no idea as to why. The lavender-eyed Hyuga was devastated at the implications of Sakura referring to her Naruto-kun and kun. You guys are quite loud. Everyone turned and saw a silver-headed boy. It took everything in his now to scowl or outright attack the boy in front of him. Kabuto Yakushi stared at the group before looking down and seeing a very unconscious Ino. With a sigh he knelt down and began using his medical ninjutsu to wake her up. If you hadn't noticed, all these genin are on edge. It would do you all well to keep quiet and lay low. Kiba looked at the boy as he finished healing Ino. Naruto placed a hand on his own stomach as a way to calm Kurama, who was snarling at the snake's right-hand man. Who are you? Choji said as the boy stood. Naruto never took his eyes off him. My name's Kabuto Yakushi, and I've been to these exams enough times to tell you what's what around here. So, Sasuke said as he looked at Kabuto, you're like what? An informant. The snake with glasses hummed. Yeah, I guess you can think of it like that, Kabuto said as he took a scroll out of his back pocket and placed it on the ground before pushing chakra into it, and a stack of cards appeared. See these? These are my ninja info cards. I am real good at gathering info on just about anything. People, places, you name it. The group looked amongst themselves. Begrudgingly Naruto had to agree. No informant was as in-depth as Kabuto, not even some of Jiraiya's spies. Do you have information of Rock Lee of the Leaf, Gaara of the Sand, and Naruto Uzumaki of the Leaf? The group were shocked at this, as two of those three names were fellow Leaf ninja, and one of them was his own teammate. Naruto looked at him incredulously, as if he could not believe what the Uchiha had just said. Oh, you know their names, Kabuto pouted. That's no fun. The boy shrugged. Oh well, let's see first up Rock Lee, he said as he pulled out a card and channeled chakra into it. Rock Lee, current age is 15. Is a member of Team 9 along with his teammates Tenten and Neji Hyuga. His sensei is Miyato Gai. He has practically no skill in ninjutsu and genjutsu, while his taijutsu is spectacular. He's completed 57 D rank missions, 23 C rank, 32 B rank, 4 A rank and 1 S rank as a genin. Anime and manga. Next is Gaara of the Sand. Let's see. The boy grew shocked. He's completed 89 D rank missions, 74 C rank, 55 B rank, 22 A rank and 15 S rank missions as a genin. Everyone was shocked at this. Apparently he did all these without getting a scratch on him. Finally Naruto Uzumaki. It says he's a war orphan of Konoha. Naruto rolled his eyes. He's on Team 7 along with Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno. His sensei is Kakashi Hatake. He, apparently completed 32 D rank missions, 0 C rank, 1 B rank, 1A rank and 0S rank missions as a genin. He's currently engaged to Tenten from Team 9, this surprised everyone that didn't already know. Kiba glared at Naruto. What the hell, man? You skipped C ranks altogether and did both A, B, and A. The dog boy was angry for sure. He was supposed to be the kick-ass genin of the rookie 9, not the dead last. Naruto narrowed his eyes at Kiba but wasn't really annoyed by him. That B rank wasn't supposed to be known by anyone but the Hokage. After all, it was the night that he hated the traitor Mizuki. Alright, a man wearing a black jacket said as he bursts into the room. Naruto recognized the man as the Proctor Ibiki, also known as the head of torture and interrogation. Everyone sit down and shut up. Break. Naruto sat down next to Hinata and sighed as he saw the girl flush and fidget. This was something he would have to deal with. He couldn't let her still be chasing after him romantically. He was engaged after all, which meant this was a job for Naruto Uzumaki, professional matchmaker. The first choice was obviously Kiba, but the dog boy was far from the ideal boyfriend material he believed Hinata deserved. Sure, in the future he was kinda good enough, but was he good enough was the question. Shikamaru was also a good choice. He was smart and caring, but he ended up married to Tamari and there was no way in hell he was going to mess that up. Shino was a good choice, being on the same team as her and all. Choji was an option, but that made Naruto shudder at who may end up with Karui in the future. The blonde sighed as he thought about it. Who was left? Shrugging these thoughts off, the young Uzumaki returned his attention to the sheet of paper before him. He might as well answer at least some of these questions, nothing else to do until the 10th question was announced. The blonde got to work. Was it technically cheating if he was using future knowledge he had obtained? After all, he didn't know this stuff until after he became the Hokage. This question perplexed him so much that he didn't even notice when he had answered 5 of the 9 questions. With a sigh, he turned the paper over to the blank side and began to write a note to Ibiki. Keep an eye on Kabuto Yakushi. He has information that only the Hokage should. He wrote before turning the paper back over and resting his arms on it and his head on his arms. Knowing Ibiki, the young time traveler knew he would report this directly to the Hokage, and without a doubt, Naruto would be called in to talk with the old man. Alright, Ibiki said when a large majority of the teams had been eliminated. Naruto raised his head and looked at the man. It's time for your 10th question. People cheered as this signaled the approaching end of the first exam. This test made Naruto a mental wreck the first time around, so he could relate to everyone's elation. But first, I want to give each of you the chance to back out now. Why the hell would we back out now? Kiba's unmistakable voice shouted. Because, if you were to get this question wrong, you would be barred from taking the Chunin exams ever again. Gasps of shock were heard all around the room. Naruto internally chuckled at this and remembered once when he had acted as a proctor for these exams. It was fun messing with the kids. What the hell? There are people here who've taken this exam before. You can't do this, Kiba shouted in agitation. Oh, I can, and I am. These other kids didn't have me as a proctor, Ibiki said with a smirk as he saw some genin squads leaving. Naruto remembered how hopeless it felt for him and it made him angry. He remembered how Sakura had tried to quit for him. Yeah, right, came the voice of the blonde as he stood up. Remember this and remember it well. The ninja who will become Hokage is me, Naruto Uzumaki. I don't care if I am a genin for the rest of my life, believe it. Martial arts films. His little outburst seemed to do the trick as a trio of students who were about to stand sat back down, their confidence renewed. Ibiki smiled as he glared at the young boy who had single-handedly given the entire class the confidence to continue. Is that so? He said with a smirk that promised pain. When he saw no one make a move, he smiled. Congratulations, you all pass. Break. Standing outside of the Forest of Death, the trio known as Team 7 were listening to the proctor. Naruto was listening extra intently. Alright maggots, when you hand in you waivers then come to that tent, she pointed to a tent with 2 large crates and a table. Where you will be given 1 scroll, by the end of these 5 days you will be expected to get the other scroll and be at the tower in the center of the forest. Team 7 was first to enter the tent with their handouts. Sasuke smirked as he slid a earth scroll into his back pocket. No one was any the wiser when the young blonde slipped away from their view for a moment before reappearing moments later. Naruto sighed. Hey wait, came the voice of Anko. The blonde silently sweated as he turned toward the purple-haired Jonin with confusion etched on his face. It was a risky move trying to swipe a heaven scroll out from under the nose of the woman, even riskier when using the stealth skills she helped him cultivate. Of course she would notice his movements, after all, they were based on her own. You're Naruto Uzumaki, right? The time traveler nodded. Yeah. Anko nodded. I hear you're getting married, be careful for her sake. The blonde would have sighed a deep sigh of relief if he wasn't currently in the woman's presence. He bowed slightly and offered a quick, I will, before leaving and walking toward his team. Anko smirked as she watched the kid who had just skillfully stolen a heaven scroll out from under her nose walk away. Damn, that kid's good. Team 7 waited patiently for the gates in front of them to open, and when it did the trio leapt into the trees as blurs before landing in a clearing about 4 to 5 miles away from the starting gate. Naruto turned toward his teammates who looked at him. Sakura had an expectant look in her eye as she smiled warmly at best friend, and Sasuke had a slightly annoyed expression married to his face. Guys, I have a plan. The Uchiha scoffed. Now you have a plan, he said as a soft jab at his blonde teammate. Naruto blew him a raspberry before pulling out a white scroll from his ninja pouch. The blonde smirked, as did the